What's the one thing that every girl dad must know? That plus 3 additional points Dr. Meg Meeker makes in her book, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. I'm John Henderson with the Conservative Book Society. Let's get to it. All right, Meg Meeker's written a great book called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, but let's put it into context first. Recently, the Wall Street Journal reported, according to the CDC, that our teens across the nation are in major trouble. Over half of boy and girl teens have reported feeling down at times in the past, and up to 30% of teen girls have reported suicidal thoughts. That's disturbing stuff. This was not going on a couple decades ago. These numbers are massive increases, and based on, again, a CDC study from 2021. So what is the issue here? Well, Dr. Meg Meeker wrote a book several years back that already addressed these issues. To her, they're very simple things that we can do as fathers to try to prevent these sorts of emotional and psychological disorders from rising in our teen girls, in our young girls as well. So 3 truths that Dr. Meg Meeker leaves with us. Number 1 is that you are her hero, and you got to show up day in and day out and be that hero. Sometimes it's a daunting task, but you got to do it. You got to show up and heal her when she's sick. And you got to show up when she's scared, and you got to show up when she's having wonderful days as well, and give her encouragement. But you have to be her hero. The second thing that all dads need to do is to teach their daughters humility. Humility rubs against a lot of what's going on in the world today, which is teaching prideful behavior, boastfulness. We see this on social media a lot of times. But if you teach your daughter humility, she's not only going to be a good person, but she also is going to have confidence. If she's out there putting her looks or the things that she has first and boasting about herself all the time, becomes the type of person who does that, she will develop an insatiable appetite for more things, more better looks, more boys, more whatever the thing might be. But if you can instill in her a sense of humility, then you've done a major good thing in trying to teach her to be a good, decent, humble person. Then she's going to be a happy person as well. And the third thing is a little bit daunting for all the dads out there, but you have got to be the man that you want your daughter to marry. She is going to look to you, as we said in the point number 1, to be her hero. But she is going to marry someone like you. And if you are abusive and mean to your wife or ex-wife, and you are dismissive of her, then she is going to grow up and marry somebody with those same qualities. More often than not, our girls are going to grow up and marry people similar to us, for better or worse. But if you're loving and you cherish her, and you give her the things, the attention that she deserves and she needs, and you give her the support and confidence, she's going to grow up and marry a man who's also going to help her be a happy, well-adjusted person as well. Don't be scared by it, but you got to show up and be the man every day that you want your daughter to marry. All right, so what's the big one thing that Dr. Meg Meeker says that all girl dads must do? And that is create boundaries, create rules, and enforce them. She mentions this throughout, top to bottom. She gives a lot of practical advice throughout her book, but the big thing is that you have got to create rules and stick to them. Just like when your daughter is a 2-year-old and she's throwing a tantrum, you go put her in timeout. The same thing is true when she's a 16-year-old and when she's a 20-year-old. You have to continue setting those boundaries. According to Dr. Meeker, those boundaries are how you show love to your daughter. So when your daughter is 16 and messes up, makes a mistake, that it is your responsibility not to say, oh, well, I can't do anything. She's a teenager. She's her own person. That's rubbish. According to Dr. Meeker, your response has to be maybe not time out for a 16-year-old, but it has to be some level of grounding her or some level of teaching responsibility, making her take some sort of corrective action, and to continue parenting her, because she's going to see that as a sign of love. Like, here are the boundaries, and my dad is going to go and fight and fight and fight to keep me within those boundaries. That's how much he loves me. That's the big ticket to it. So here's the lasting thought that she gives that I think is stuck with me ever since I read this book. And that is, if being a good dad required you to say no 10 times or to discipline 10 times, everybody would do it. But that's not what it is. And that's not what you signed up for. What it is it's doing it 1,000 times. It's telling your daughter no hundreds of times, and it's punishing her another 100 times. And it is staying on it day in and day out. And you are best showing your love to her by creating those boundaries. These are the rules, explaining to her what the rules are, and setting the expectation that she is going to fall within those rules. And if you don't do that, she's going to be wildly out of control. According to Dr. Meeker, she says she's never had anybody show up at her doctor's office with major problems because their dad was too strict or their dad was an authoritarian. But what she sees is that she sees people showing up day in and day out because their dads are absent, or their dads ignore their daughters, or they're not participating in some way. Dad absenceness is an enormous problem throughout our society. We see this single mom epidemic going on, and a lot of that is because the dads have walked out and they're not assuming the responsibility. So take this opportunity to go out there and be a good dad today. Read this book because it's chock full of advice. Anywhere from why it's scientifically horrific for teenagers to be having sex, to how you can actually discipline your 2-year-olds and 16-year-olds in measures that you can take. I can't tell you enough how much I enjoyed this book. I don't want to give you all the tricks because she says it better in her book than I can possibly say it. But the bottom line is this: dads, you're an enormous deal. Your daughter's life depends on you showing up and being there throughout her entire childhood and her teen years. And two last very obvious points. One, you got to show up and show your daughter love day in and day out. And number two, if you don't show up and be the man that your daughter needs you to be, she's gonna find another man. And that's just the bottom line truth. I'm John Henderson with the Conservative Book Society. Thanks for listening. Till next time.